In business, betrayal comes with a handshake and a smile. In marriage, you don't even get the handshake. Mm-hmm. My name is Alex Carter, and I should have seen it coming. At 40, I've spent 15 years as a business consultant in downtown Chicago, reading people like quarterly reports. I can spot a liar across a boardroom table, catch financial manipulation in spreadsheets, and smell desperation on a client from 3 blocks away. But when it came to my own wife, I was blind as a bat wearing sunglasses in a coal mine. Jessica Carter, nee Whitmore, had always been high maintenance. When we met 8 years ago at a gallery opening, she was this stunning fashion designer with champagne tastes and caviar dreams. I was the guy in the decent suit who could afford to make those dreams reality. Looking back, that should have been my first red flag. But Jessica had this way of making you feel like the most important person in the room, at least when she needed something. Our Lincoln Park penthouse reflected her expensive tastes perfectly. Everything was white marble, chrome fixtures, and furniture that cost more than most people's cars. Jessica's design studio took up half the space, filled with fabric samples, sketches, and mannequins wearing her latest creations. The other half was mine, a home office where I worked late into the night, building the consulting firm that paid for her lifestyle. The first crack appeared 3 months ago, though I didn't recognize it then. Jessica started taking mysterious phone calls, stepping out onto the balcony, with her voice dropping to whispers. When I asked about it, she'd wave me off with some excuse about difficult clients or fabric suppliers in Paris. She'd always talked about expanding internationally, so it seemed plausible. Then came the late nights. Jessica, who used to be home by 6 with a martini and complaints about her day, suddenly had urgent meetings that ran until 10 or 11. Her explanations grew more elaborate. Emergency fittings for society wives, last-minute alterations for charity galas, consultations with potential investors. You wouldn't understand the fashion world, Alex, she'd say, pecking my cheek before disappearing into her studio. It's not like your boring business meetings. The expensive gifts started appearing around the same time. A diamond bracelet she claimed was a sample from a jewelry designer she might collaborate with. Designer shoes that were research for an upcoming collection. A silk scarf that cost more than my monthly car payment. Supposedly a gift from a grateful client. My business partner, Ethan Price, noticed the changes before I did. We were reviewing quarterly projections in my downtown office when he casually mentioned that Jessica seemed different at my birthday dinner the previous week. Different how? I asked, not looking up from the spreadsheets. I don't know, man. More secretive? And did you see how she kept checking her phone during your toast? I had noticed, actually. While I was thanking everyone for coming, Jessica was typing furiously on her phone, barely looking up when people applauded. When I asked about it later, she said her assistant was having a crisis with a delivery. You're being paranoid, I told Ethan, but the seed was planted. The breaking point came on a Thursday evening in October. I was supposed to meet a potential client at Gibson's, one of Chicago's most exclusive steakhouses. The client canceled at the last minute, but I decided to grab dinner anyway. I was reviewing notes on my phone when I spotted a familiar laugh across the restaurant. Jessica sat in a corner booth, wearing a black dress I'd never seen before. The fabric clung to her curves like liquid silk, and her blonde hair was styled in an elegant updo that probably cost $300. She looked absolutely stunning, which made what happened next even more devastating. The man across from her was tall, dark-haired, and handsome in that dangerous way that makes smart women do stupid things. He had the kind of confident smile that belonged on magazine covers or wanted posters. As I watched, he reached across the table and slipped something small and glittering onto Jessica's finger, a ring. My wife giggled like a teenager, holding her hand up to catch the light. The man, who definitely wasn't a fabric supplier or potential investor, leaned forward and kissed her. Not a business kiss, not a friendly peck, but the kind of kiss that belongs in bedrooms, not restaurants. I sat frozen for what felt like hours, but was probably only minutes. My brain struggled to process what I was seeing. This was my wife, the woman I'd been married to for 5 years, the woman I'd supported through every career setback and celebrated with at every success. And she was sitting 30 feet away, accepting jewelry from another man like I didn't exist. The smart play would have been to march over and confront them. The emotional play would have been to storm out and file for divorce the next morning. Instead, I did what I do best. I gathered intelligence. I quietly took out my phone and snapped several photos, making sure to capture their faces clearly. Then I sent a text to Ethan. You ever hire a PI? His response came back immediately. Why? What happened? I'll explain tomorrow. Just need a name. I paid my check and left without Jessica noticing me. The drive home was a blur of Chicago traffic and racing thoughts. By the time I reached our building, I'd made a decision. Jessica wanted to play games? Fine. But she was about to learn that I didn't get to the top of the consulting world by being a pushover. I found Jessica in our bedroom, changing into pajamas like she'd been home all evening. The black dress was draped over a chair, and she was humming softly to herself. How was your day? I asked casually. Oh, the usual chaos. Had to deal with a supplier issue that ran late. She didn't even look at me while she lied. How was your client dinner? Productive, I said, which was technically true. Very productive. That night, I lay awake staring at the ceiling while Jessica slept peacefully beside me. The woman I'd loved and trusted was living a double life, and I'd been too blind to see it. But that was about to change. Jessica thought she was playing chess while I was playing checkers. She was about to discover that I'd been playing chess all along. Ray Moreno's office looked exactly like what you'd expect from a private investigator. Cramped, cluttered, and smelling of stale coffee and cigarettes. The man himself was in his 50s, with graying hair and the kind of weathered face that suggested he'd seen everything at least twice. So your wife's cheating, he said, without preamble, as I settled into the cracked leather chair across from his desk. And you want documentation. I want everything, I replied. Who he is, what he does, how long this has been going on. I want a full itemized receipt of my marriage's destruction. Ray chuckled, a sound like gravel in a cement mixer. I like you already. Most guys come in here crying or threatening to kill somebody. You sound like you're planning a hostile takeover. Close enough. I showed him the photos from the restaurant, and Ray studied them with professional interest. Good quality shots. You ever consider a career change? He pulled out a magnifying glass and examined the mystery man's face. Handsome devil. Probably knows it too. Can you identify him? Give me 48 hours. Ray was as good as his word. When I returned to his office 2 days later, he had a thick folder waiting for me. Your wife's got expensive taste in men, he said, sliding the folder across his desk. Meet Damian Blackwell, age 38, professional con artist. I opened the folder to find a comprehensive dossier. Damian's real name was David Brennan, and he had a history that read like a crime novel. Multiple identities, a string of wealthy women who'd been fleeced for hundreds of thousands of dollars, and a pattern of disappearing just before the authorities caught up with him. He's been in Chicago for 6 months, Ray continued. Before that, Miami, where he convinced a real estate heiress to invest $2 million in a non-existent development project. Before Miami, it was Seattle and a tech executive's widow who thought she was funding the next big startup. What's his angle with Jessica? Still working on that, but I've got some theories. Your wife's got access to your business accounts, right? Joint credit cards, shared assets? My stomach dropped. Some of them, yes. Then she's probably been feeding him information about your finances. These guys are patient. They spend months building trust before they make their move. Ray was right to be thorough. Over the next week, he uncovered a web of deception that made my head spin. Jessica had opened a private bank account using our home address, but only her name. She'd been making regular deposits, small amounts that wouldn't trigger any automatic alerts. But they added up to nearly $50,000 over 3 months. Where's she getting the money? I asked when Ray showed me the bank statements. Your business expense account, mostly. A few hundred here, 1,000 there. She's been creative, spa treatments that never happened, business lunches with clients who don't exist, supplies for her design studio that were never delivered. The betrayal cut deeper than I'd expected. It wasn't just the affair. It was the systematic theft, the elaborate lies, the complete disregard for everything we'd built together. Jessica hadn't just cheated on me. She'd been robbing me blind to finance her new relationship, but Ray saved the worst for last. I've been following them for 3 days, he said, pulling out a small digital recorder. They meet at his apartment every Tuesday and Thursday afternoon. Yesterday, I got close enough to record their conversation. He pressed play, and Jessica's voice filled the dingy office. When are we going to tell Alex? She was saying. I'm tired of sneaking around. Soon, baby. But we need to be smart about this. Your husband's not stupid. If we move too fast, he might get suspicious and freeze the accounts. What accounts? Jessica's voice was sharp. I thought you said we had enough to start over in Paris. Damian's laugh was cold. We will, once we get access to his business funds. That consulting firm of his is worth at least $2 million. All we need is a few signatures, and we can clean him out before he knows what hit him. I don't know about this, Damien. Taking his personal money is one thing, but destroying his business. You said you wanted a new life. This is the price. Unless you'd rather stay married to your boring husband and keep living in Chicago. There was a long pause before Jessica spoke again. No, you're right. Alex has had his turn. It's time for mine. I felt like I'd been punched in the stomach. This wasn't just an affair. It was a conspiracy to destroy everything I'd worked for. Jessica and her con artist boyfriend were planning to steal my business and disappear, leaving me with nothing. Ray clicked off the recorder. I'm sorry, Alex. I know this isn't what you wanted to hear. Actually, I said, surprising myself with how calm I sounded. It's exactly what I needed to hear. What do you mean? I stood up and straightened my tie. I mean that Jessica just made a very expensive mistake. She's been playing checkers while thinking she's playing chess, but now I know the rules of her game. What are you going to do? I smiled for the first time in weeks. I'm going to play by my own rules. The Chicago Children's Hospital Charity Gala was the kind of event Jessica lived for. 500 of the city's elite gathered in the ballroom of the Drake Hotel, wearing designer gowns and $1,000 tuxedos, all pretending they cared more about sick kids than being seen with the right people. Jessica looked stunning in a red Valentino dress that probably cost more than most people's monthly salary. She worked the room like a professional, air-kissing society wives and charming their husbands with stories about her latest designs. To anyone watching, we looked like the perfect couple, successful, attractive, and deeply in love, if only they knew. Alex! Jessica's voice carried across the ballroom as she approached with a man in tow. I want you to meet someone. My heart rate spiked as I recognized Damien Blackwell, looking every inch the sophisticated businessman in his perfectly tailored tuxedo. Up close, he was even more handsome than the restaurant photos had suggested. The kind of man who could charm his way into Fort Knox if he set his mind to it. This is Damien, Jessica said, her cheeks flushed with excitement. He's an international business consultant, just like you. Isn't that a coincidence? Fascinating, I said, extending my hand. Damien's grip was firm and confident. What kind of consulting do you do? Import-export, mostly. I help American companies establish European partnerships. His smile was practiced and perfect. Jessica tells me you're in the same field. Similar, yes, though I focus more on domestic markets. I kept my voice neutral and professional. Jessica mentioned you might be able to help with her Paris expansion. I'd be delighted. Your wife has incredible talent. She deserves international recognition. The way he said your wife made my skin crawl, but I maintained my composure. She certainly does. I've always supported Jessica's ambitions, no matter the cost. We chatted for another few minutes about business, European markets, and the challenges of international expansion. Damien was smooth. I had to give him that. He had answers for everything, spoke knowledgeably about fashion industry trends, and even mentioned several legitimate companies he claimed to work with. But I caught the tells, the slight hesitation before answering certain questions, the way his eyes shifted when discussing specific clients, the practiced responses that sounded like they'd been rehearsed. After 15 years of reading people in business negotiations, I could spot a con artist from across the room. We should have lunch sometime, I said, as the conversation wound down. I'd love to hear more about the European market. I'd like that very much, Damien replied, though I caught a flicker of uncertainty in his eyes. As they walked away, I watched Jessica whisper something in Damien's ear that made him laugh. She was glowing with happiness in a way I hadn't seen in months. It would have been heartwarming if she hadn't been planning to destroy my life. I excused myself and stepped onto the hotel's terrace, pulling out my phone to call Ray. How did it go? He asked. Perfect. He's exactly what you said. Smooth, confident, and completely fake. Did you get the information I asked for? Your wife's been busy. 3 more withdrawals this week, totaling $15,000. And I've got something else you're going to want to see. What kind of something? The kind that's going to make your divorce attorney very happy. Can you meet me tomorrow morning? The next morning, I sat in Ray's office reviewing the latest intelligence. He'd managed to get close enough to Jessica's studio to install a listening device, and the recordings were devastating. This one's from yesterday afternoon, Ray said, queuing up an audio file, right after the gala. Jessica's voice came through the speakers, breathless with excitement. Alex bought it completely. He actually wants to have lunch with you. I told you he was an easy mark, Damien replied. Guys like him are so arrogant, they can't imagine their wives would want anyone else. He's not arrogant, he's just boring, predictable. He thinks if he keeps writing checks, I'll be happy forever. Well, he's about to write his biggest check yet. How much access do you have to the business accounts? I'm a signatory on 3 of them, including the main operating account. But Alex would notice if large amounts went missing. Not if we're smart about it. Small transfers over time. Maybe some fake invoices for your design business. By the time he figures it out, we'll be in Paris with new identities. What about his friends? Ethan's been asking questions about why I'm never around anymore. Let me worry about Ethan. Once we have the money, it won't matter what anyone thinks. The recording continued for another 10 minutes, with Jessica and Damien discussing specific account numbers, transfer schedules, and their timeline for leaving Chicago. They were planning to take everything, not just my money, but my business, my reputation, and my future. But they'd made one crucial mistake. They'd underestimated me. Ray, I need you to do something for me, I said after the recording ended. Name it. I want you to introduce Damien to someone. A wealthy widow, maybe, or a lonely heiress. Someone too good to pass up. Ray grinned. A honey trap. Exactly. If Damien's as greedy as we think, he won't be able to resist a bigger score. And if he's cheating on Jessica while she's cheating on me, the whole thing falls apart. I like it. I've got just the person. My niece Sarah. She's an actress, and she's been looking for work. Perfect. Set it up. Marms for me. As I left Ray's office, I felt a familiar thrill, the same rush I got when I was about to close a difficult business deal. Jessica and Damien thought they were playing me, but they were about to learn that I didn't build a multi-million-dollar consulting firm by being naive. The game was just getting started. Maram Sarashen was perfect for the role. Ray's niece was a struggling actress in her early 30s, beautiful in an understated way that suggested old money rather than new wealth. She had the kind of quiet confidence that came from good breeding and expensive education, exactly the type of woman Damien wouldn't be able to resist. Ray had crafted her backstory carefully. Sarah was supposedly the widow of a tech entrepreneur who died in a skiing accident, leaving her with a $50 million estate and no idea how to manage it. She was looking for investment opportunities and had heard through mutual friends that Damien specialized in helping wealthy Americans establish European business interests. The introduction happened at the Palmer House Hotel bar on a Tuesday evening. Ray had positioned himself at a corner table where he could observe and record everything. I watched from across the room, nursing a whiskey and pretending to read emails on my phone. Damien arrived 15 minutes late, which Sarah had been coached to interpret as fashionably European rather than simply rude. He was dressed in an expensive suit and carried himself with the kind of casual arrogance that suggested money was never a concern. Miss Chen, I'm Damien Blackwell. Ray told me you were interested in discussing some investment opportunities. Sarah played her part perfectly, seeming slightly nervous and overwhelmed by financial decisions. She mentioned her late husband's estate, her desire to honor his memory by investing wisely, and her complete lack of experience with international markets. I could see Damien's eyes light up from across the room. This was exactly the kind of mark he specialized in: wealthy, vulnerable, and trusting. Within 30 minutes, he was leaning forward attentively, asking detailed questions about her assets, and suggesting several exclusive opportunities that weren't available to ordinary investors. I have a development project in Monaco, he said, his voice dropping to a confidential whisper. Luxury condominiums, with guaranteed returns of 30% annually. The minimum investment is usually $10 million, but for someone like you, Sarah played hard to get, expressing interest but insisting she needed time to think. Damien gave her his card and suggested they meet again in a few days to discuss details. As he left the bar, I saw him pull out his phone and start typing furiously. I'd bet money he was texting Jessica about his new prospect. The next phase of my plan required more direct action. Damien drove a black Mercedes S-Class that he probably leased under one of his fake identities. It was parked in the garage beneath his River North apartment building, and thanks to Ray's reconnaissance, I knew exactly where to find it. Breaking into the garage was easier than expected. The security was designed to keep people out of the building, not the parking area. I waited until 3 in the morning, when the building was quiet, then slipped inside wearing dark clothes and a baseball cap. Damien's Mercedes was parked in space 247, gleaming under the fluorescent lights like a black mirror. I'd brought a small toolkit and had researched the best ways to disable a luxury vehicle without causing permanent damage. I wasn't trying to destroy the car. I was sending a message. First, I let the air out of all 4 tires. Then I used a small knife to scratch "Liar" into the paint on the driver's side door. Finally, I lifted the hood and disconnected the battery cables, ensuring the car wouldn't start even if Damien managed to reinflate the tires. I left a note under the windshield wiper. "Stay away from my wife, or next time it won't just be your car." The next morning, I was in my office reviewing client files when my phone buzzed with a text from Jessica. "Damien's car was vandalized last night. Someone's targeting him. I'm scared." I texted back. "That's terrible. Did he call the police?" "He doesn't want to involve them. Says it might be related to a business deal gone wrong." Of course he didn't want police involvement. The last thing a con artist needed was official scrutiny of his activities. Damien's response was predictably aggressive. He showed up at my office that afternoon, brushing past my assistant despite her protests. "We need to talk," he said, closing my office door behind him. I looked up from my computer with feigned surprise. "Damien, right? From the charity gala. What can I do for you?" "Don't play dumb with me, Carter. I know you know about Jessica and me." I leaned back in my chair and studied him carefully. Up close, without the charm and polish, he looked exactly like what he was, a predator who'd been backed into a corner. "I'm not sure what you're talking about," I said calmly. "Someone vandalized my car last night, left a note telling me to stay away from your wife. Now either you're dumber than you look, or you're playing games." "I'm a business consultant, Damien. I don't play games." I stood up and walked around my desk, stopping just close enough to invade his personal space. "I solve problems." "Is that a threat?" "It's a statement of fact. You see, I've spent the last 2 weeks learning everything about you, David Brennan. That's your real name, isn't it? Along with Michael Torres, James Davidson, and Robert Chen. Quite a collection of identities for someone in import-export." The color drained from Damien's face. "I don't know what you're talking about." "Miami real estate heiress, $2 million. Seattle tech widow, $1.5 million. Should I go on?" I pulled out my phone and showed him one of Ray's surveillance photos. "This is you and Jessica at Gibson's 3 weeks ago. This is you at your apartment yesterday afternoon. And this?" I swiped to a photo of him with Sarah at the Palmer House bar. "This is you trying to con my private investigator's niece last night, while my wife thinks you're planning a future together." Damien's composure finally cracked. "You son of a bitch. Now we're getting somewhere." I smiled coldly. "Here's what's going to happen. You're going to disappear from Chicago. Tonight. You're going to delete Jessica's number, close whatever fake accounts you've been using, and find a new city to terrorize. And if I don't, then I release everything to the FBI, the Chicago Police Department, and every newspaper in the city. I'll make sure your face is on the evening news with a complete rundown of your criminal history. How long do you think it'll take the authorities in Miami and Seattle to track you down?" Damien stood there for a long moment, his hands clenched into fists. I could see him calculating odds, weighing options, trying to find an angle that would let him salvage the situation. Finally, he spoke. "This isn't over, Carter." "Yes, it is." I walked back to my desk and sat down. "My assistant will validate your parking on the way out." After he left, I called Ray to give him an update. "Phase 1 complete. How's Sarah doing with her part?" "Like a pro. She's got him convinced she's ready to invest $15 million in his Monaco project. They're meeting tomorrow night to finalize the details." "Perfect. And Jessica?" "Still in the dark. She thinks her boyfriend is a legitimate businessman who's about to whisk her away to Paris." I looked out my office window at the Chicago skyline, feeling a familiar sense of satisfaction. In business, timing was everything. You had to know when to be patient, when to apply pressure, and when to go for the kill. Jessica and Damien had made the mistake of thinking I was just another Mark, a boring, predictable husband who would never see their betrayal coming. They were about to learn that I hadn't built my success by being passive. The real game was just beginning. Jessica's world began crumbling on a Wednesday morning in November. I was in the kitchen making coffee when she stumbled out of the bedroom, her phone pressed to her ear and panic written across her face. "What do you mean you can't reach him?" she was saying. "He was supposed to call me last night." I pretended to focus on the newspaper while listening to her side of the conversation. It was clearly one of her friends, probably Sophie Lynn, who'd been Jessica's confidante throughout the affair. "No, I haven't heard from him since Monday. He said he had some business meetings, but Jessica's voice trailed off as she noticed me watching. I'll call you back. She ended the call and tried to compose herself, but I could see the cracks in her facade. Everything okay? I asked casually. Fine, just some drama with a client. She poured herself coffee with shaking hands. I might be late tonight. I have a meeting with a potential investor. Anyone I know? I doubt it. He's from out of town. I nodded sympathetically, though we both knew she was lying. Damien had disappeared exactly as I'd demanded, leaving Jessica confused and abandoned. But she didn't know that yet. She probably thought he was just busy or dealing with legitimate business issues. The truth would hit her soon enough. That afternoon, Ray called with an update. The FBI took the bait. They've been tracking Damien for months in connection with the Miami case, and the evidence we provided was exactly what they needed to get an arrest warrant. Where is he now? In custody. They picked him up this morning at O'Hare, trying to board a flight to Montreal using a fake passport. Your wife's boyfriend is going to be a guest of the federal government for a very long time. I felt a surge of satisfaction. What about the money Jessica stole from our accounts? That's where it gets interesting. The FBI froze all of Damien's assets as part of their investigation, including the account where Jessica had been transferring funds. She's not going to be able to access any of it. And my business accounts, completely protected. I made sure to document every fraudulent transaction Jessica made. Your attorney says it'll be enough to ensure she gets nothing in the divorce. That evening, I waited at home for Jessica to return from her fictional meeting. She came through the door at nearly 10 o'clock, looking disheveled and desperate. Any luck with your investor? I asked. He had to reschedule. Jessica avoided eye contact, heading straight for her studio. I'm going to work on some designs. I gave her an hour before following her into the studio. I found her sitting at her desk, staring blankly at her phone. Jessica, we need to talk. She looked up with red-rimmed eyes. About what? About Damien Blackwell. Or should I call him David Brennan? The phone slipped from Jessica's hand and clattered to the floor. Her face went white as she realized her secret was out. Alex, I can explain. No need. I already know everything. The affair, the stolen money, the plan to clean out my business accounts and disappear to Paris. I've known for weeks. Jessica's mouth opened and closed like a fish out of water. How? I'm a business consultant, Jessica. I investigate things for a living. Did you really think I wouldn't notice $50,000 missing from our accounts? Or that I wouldn't eventually spot you having dinner with your boyfriend? She tried to stand, but her legs gave out, and she collapsed back into her chair. Where is he? Damien was supposed to call me, but his phone goes straight to voicemail. Damien is in federal custody. The FBI arrested him this morning for fraud, identity theft, and about a dozen other charges. Your boyfriend is a career criminal, Jessica. You were just his latest mark. That's not true. He loves me. We were going to start over together. I pulled out my phone and played one of Ray's recordings, the conversation where Damien discussed using Jessica to access my business accounts. Your husband's not stupid. If we move too fast, he might get suspicious and freeze the accounts. Jessica listened in horror as her lover's voice filled the room, revealing his true intentions. All we need is a few signatures, and we can clean him out before he knows what hit him. When the recording ended, Jessica was crying. He said he loved me. He said whatever you needed to hear, just like he did with the real estate heiress in Miami and the tech widow in Seattle. You weren't special, Jessica. You were just convenient. What happens now? I looked around the studio at the remnants of her dreams, the sketches, the fabric samples, the half-finished designs that would never see the light of day. Now you face the consequences. I've filed for divorce, and I'm pressing charges for the money you stole. The FBI has frozen all of Damien's accounts, including the one where you've been stashing my money, so you won't be able to access any of it. Alex, please, I made a mistake, but we can work through this. No, Jessica. We can't. You didn't make a mistake. You made a series of calculated decisions to betray me, steal from me, and destroy everything I've worked for. That's not a mistake. That's a crime. I walked toward the door, then paused and looked back at her. Your parents know, by the way. I called them this afternoon. They're disappointed. Jessica's sobs followed me as I left the studio. I felt no satisfaction in her pain, but I felt no guilt either. She'd made her choices, and now she had to live with the consequences. The next morning, I wasn't surprised to find Jessica gone. She'd packed a few bags and left during the night, probably to stay with friends or family. I changed the locks and had the building's security remove her access to the apartment. My phone rang as I was reviewing divorce papers in my office. Alex, it's Sophie Lynn. I need to talk to you about Jessica. Sophie had been Jessica's best friend since college, and I'd always liked her, despite her tendency toward gossip and drama. What about her? She's staying with me, and she's a mess. She keeps talking about how you set her up, how you destroyed her relationship with Damien. Damien destroyed himself. I just helped speed up the process. Look, I know she cheated on you, and I know that was wrong. But did you have to be so cruel about it? I leaned back in my chair and considered my response. Sophie, did Jessica ever tell you that she was stealing money from our business accounts to fund her affair? Silence. Did she mention that she and Damien were planning to clean out my company and disappear, leaving me with nothing? More silence. Or that her boyfriend was a career criminal who'd done the same thing to at least 2 other women? No. She said you were just being vindictive because she'd found someone who made her happy. Jessica made her choices, Sophie. She chose to have an affair, chose to steal from me, and chose to plan the destruction of my business. I simply chose not to be a victim. After Sophie hung up, I sat in my office looking out at the Chicago skyline. In a few months, the divorce would be final, and I could start rebuilding my life. Jessica would have to face federal charges for her role in Damien's schemes, and she'd probably serve some time in prison. It wasn't